Mark chapter 4 we've entitled Parables. Hopefully we've seen that as we've been through the first 34 verses. Noticed a few different parables, and we're picking up in verses 35 to 41, where here we're seeing Jesus calms the storm or calms the sea, however you would like to express that. We'll pick up in verse 38 here in just a moment, but if someone would refresh our memory just a little bit and read Mark 4 verses 35 to 41 out loud for us, please.
And the same day, when the evening was come, he said unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship, and there were also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him, and said unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey?
Good, thank you. Notice back in verse 35, the same day. A lot of times we see in the life and ministry of Jesus, a lot of things that are recorded all occurred in the same day. So he is shown in Mark to be the straightway servant. He's always going, he's always doing, he's always trying to do his best for others. The same day when the even was come, it's now getting dark, evening, he saith unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. It appears that they're going from the western side of the Sea of Galilee to the eastern side. And when they had sent away the multitude, recall that from previous chapters, that just about everywhere Jesus went, there were masses of people all over. They took him even as he was in the ship. Even as he was seems to imply from the context that at least he was tired. He was exhausted. He was worn out. So this is yet another way. I think we were going to see the miracle that Jesus worked, but also it emphasizes his humanity. Do you get tired? So did the Lord. I don't know if I've ever slept in a ship, but he did, at least once. Notice that. And there were also with him other little ships. That seems to imply that it was not a terrible time to travel, that it was seemingly just as good a time as any to go from one side of the Sea of Galilee to the next. And what happened? Evidently, this still is the case at the Sea of Galilee. There arose a great storm of wind, verse 37, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full, or perhaps the idea was beginning to take on water. Okay? A ship in the water is okay, but water starts getting into the ship, there's a problem. Okay? Remember how we illustrated that from a practical aspect? We're the Lord's church, and we're in the world, but we're not to be of the world. But when the world gets into the Lord's church, there's a problem. That's not good. So we have to teach that out, then ultimately take whatever steps the New Testament teaches us to take to help keep the Lord's church pure and sanctified. Now notice verse 38. He was in the hinder part, the stern, the back, whatever you want to say, of the ship, asleep on a pillow. Now that's amazing, isn't it? Here this is going on. Think of like an open rowboat with sails, perhaps, a larger type ship. And here they're struggling to get across, we may say. There's a great storm occurring, and Jesus is back there just sleeping. I reckon that's how tired he was. I mean, he just is exhausted. He was in the hinder stern part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him and saying to him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? So recall, as we talked last time, at least 4 of these guys, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, were fishermen. And they were men of Galilee, and they were crossing the Sea of Galilee. So it stands to reason that at least 4 of these guys had spent probably a good amount of their lives on that same body of water, in that same type of ship, going across from one side to another. So when they say, Master, carest thou not that we perish? This was a pretty serious storm. But what do we also see? This storm didn't wake Jesus. He's still asleep there at the back of the ship, so to speak. Now, we do want to emphasize this point. At this point in at least Mark's narrative, or at least in the life and ministry of Jesus, there's no doubt that these guys had witnessed several great miracles of Jesus. And yet, Master, carest thou not that we perish? So that's one way of saying that they're afraid for their lives. Right? Yes. Now, their fear should have been overcome by their faith in Jesus Christ. But what's the problem? It's hard to think straight. When you feel like there's troublesome times, a practical aspect in the storms of life, when emotions are high, it's hard to think clearly, isn't it? Right? But that's how life is. Life happens fast. And so we just have these fleeting moments to try and do the best that we can. And sometimes we're overcome by fear. Yes, it is true. Faith is the victory. The Bible teaches that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But what's the reality? The reality is sometimes in the middle of the storm, we're afraid. We don't see how this is going to end well. But that's why we have to think now, while the storms generally aren't happening, and then when the storm comes, we'll hopefully be as prepared as we can. And I hope you understand I'm not necessarily talking about a literal storm, but even that aspect of preparing before the storm is still wise, even if it's a literal storm or a spiritual storm or an emotional storm, whatever it might be. Now notice what happens. Verse 39, and he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased. And there was a great calm. Notice, great calm. What are the two key ideas with biblical miracles? Immediate and what? Complete. Now, I know neither one of those words are necessarily stated right there, but what happened? Jesus spoke. What did he say? Peace be still. And what happened? The storm ceased. It was immediate. It was complete when? After Jesus spoke what words? Peace be still. How do you explain that? Is there a natural way to explain that? Could we say it's coincidental? It's coincidental. Right? I don't believe so. Even though we're not dealing with the text of the book of John, John probably gives us as good a summary statement for every miracle, especially of Jesus in the Bible. And truly many other signs did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you might. So all these miracles of Jesus are designed to create faith in our hearts. For what purpose? That you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. So why is this in the Bible? Well, first off, it's true because the Bible tells the truth. Here's the truth of what happened. But when we stop and think, is this natural or is this supernatural? I think we'd all conclude this is supernatural. To do what? To establish Jesus' supremacy over this earthly domain. Do you know why that is? He's the one that created everything. Remember, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him. Him who? Him. The Word. Well, who's the Word? Jesus. So is he master of this earthly domain? Yes. Has he proved that right here? Yes. So where there may have been some doubts, even in his disciples' hearts, I mean, come on. He's already proved, and we'll get into the next chapter, Lord willing, here directly, and we'll see it's miracles. I mean, the whole chapter really is 3 different miracles worked by Jesus of Mark chapter 5. But anyhow, even before we get into that, this is a miracle. So there's no natural explanation that could be given for what happened. We believe it was no mere coincidence. And the reaction of those who were on the ship with Jesus, who were, at least 4 of them, were fishermen from that area, shows their understanding of what happened. They understood this is not natural. This is not the normal way of going about things. So what was supernatural about it? Jesus spoke, and the storm, the wind, whatever you want to say, the sea, ceased and became, and there was a great calm. Now notice verse number 40. And he said unto them, this is Jesus speaking to his disciples, it would appear, why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith. Now, Jesus is the great heart knower. And many times, here's an example where Jesus asked questions. Jesus probably never asked questions to gain information. He asked questions, it would seem, to help stir their minds, to help stir people's thoughts up, to soak in what just happened. I mean, let's think about it. The safest place that you could ever be on planet Earth was wherever Jesus was, in a very real sense. Now, there was a sense that, Jesus was in danger at times of losing his life, but he didn't die till it was time to die. And when it was time to die, what happened? He died. Okay? But as a general rule, it's not time for him to die. Where's the safest place you can be on planet Earth? Literally, wherever Jesus is. But they forgot that, didn't they? Now, in a very real spiritual sense, where's the safest place you can be in a spiritual sense right now today? But a faithful member of the Lord's church. Right? That is the absolute one location of spiritual safety that the Lord has made. Now, that doesn't mean that we're free from persecution. That doesn't mean we're free from physical harm. That doesn't mean we're free from temptation. But if we'll walk in the light as God is in the light, we're good to go. Everything else will work out. So notice, he said unto them, why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? So faith causes, or fear rather, fear causes faith to falter even in the faithful. And these guys would have been considered the faithful. But when fear creeps in, what does it do? It tones down faith quite a bit, doesn't it? And then festering fear leads to failure. So it should not be the case, but it is the case. Okay? What do we forget? What did these guys forget? Even though it wasn't written at the time that this happened, we can see that faith is the victory based off 1 John 5 and verse 4, Revelation 2 and verse 10. Be thou faithful how long? Unto death. And it'll be all right, won't it? Even if we die, or when we die, if we're faithful, it's good. We'll receive a crown of life. I don't believe that's literal, but it's a metaphor for eternal life. That is, we'll live forever in heaven with the Godhead. So no matter what, we don't generally, think about it. Are we going to check out of here alive? No. No. Could there be an exception to that? Yes, the second coming of Christ. But what's going to happen to those who are alive at the second coming of Christ? We're going to be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. What does that feel like? What does it feel like to die? You ever thought about that? It may be easier to die than it was to live. I don't know what it feels like to die. And I guess I'll find out one of these days, just like all the rest of us. But if you stop to think that dying might be the easiest part of it, that the living sometimes can be tough. So what do we have to do while we're alive? Hold on. Don't give up. Don't quit. Okay, is faith the victory? Yes, but what's the but? We're humans. And what are humans subject to? We're subject to doubt. We're subject to discouragement. We're subject to forgetting everything that we've known for a long time in the heat of the moment. True or false? So, we can look and criticize these guys and say all types of things, but when we think about our own lives, have we always batted 1,000 when it came time to hit the ball? No. We failed. Sometimes we didn't even have the courage to swing. Right? We were just standing there watching life go by. But sometimes we've gotten involved in life and we swing and we miss. But what do we keep doing? Do we just give up and quit? No. We keep doing what we know to be right and it'll work out. So, why is this written? First off, it's true. Second off, it's designed to create faith in our hearts in Jesus as the Son of God. But it's also showing us that, hey, there's probably going to be storms of any sort that come up in our lives where we're not going to be the shining example of what to do. Right? So what do? Pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and we keep on doing what we know to be right. Notice verse 41. And they feared exceedingly. Really? Really? They feared exceedingly and said one to another, what manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Don't overlook what just happened to these individuals. A violent, evidently sudden storm on the Sea of Galilee had caused them to believe that their lives were in jeopardy. True or false? Master, carest thou not that we perish, seems to be strong testimony to me that they feared that their lives were in jeopardy. Jesus was awakened by them from sleep and did what? He, so to speak, rolls out of bed and does what? Peace be still. He rebukes the wind and said to the sea, peace be still. The wind ceased. There was a great calm. And then what happened? And they feared exceedingly. That shows the impact that miracles had on individuals' souls. You know, one of the three Bible words really are synonyms. I wouldn't say that they're always, but they can be at least sometimes. The first one is miracles. The second one would be signs, but the third one seems to indicate what these guys felt. It's wonders. How would you react if you had been there on that ship and you were there? You witnessed everything that happened. You heard what that man said. You went from rocking on that boat perhaps to great calm. What would that do to you? Would that cause wonder in your heart? That's why sometimes you'll see miracles, signs, and wonders. They're all lumped in that same category. Miracles, it's supernatural. Signs, it was proof that God had intervened. And wonder shows, man, what would that do to your heart? I mean, how would you feel? There may be a little bit of terror that's in there too, and sitting there saying, what manner of man is this? Yes, it's awe-inspiring, but at the same time, can you imagine the power that is involved in rebuking the wind and the sea? Can you imagine somebody trying to go out and here comes hurricane whatever, category whatever, and goes out there and says, peace be still, and it just immediately and completely stops? What would that do to you? You'd say, man, who can whip a hurricane? Jesus. I remember very well, one of our instructors gave us this illustration. When you think that you got it all figured out, go stand outside and whip a lightning bolt. And then remind yourself that if you can't handle that lightning bolt, how can you handle God? The one who created and sent the light. Can you imagine that? So when we think that we've got everything figured out, go whip a hurricane. Go whip a lightning bolt. Go handle just the weather. And we can't do it, can we? What does that say we are in reference to God? We are far inferior to God. So we better figure out what He expects of us and do it. Why? Because we won't be with Him forever. And here's another truthful account of something that really happened, and it's designed for several purposes, not the least of which is to create faith in our hearts that Jesus of Nazareth is the Son of God and that He has absolute authority and power over this earthly domain. So what's the application we could perhaps take home for our lives? When the storms of life whip and wail, stay with Jesus. You'll be all right. There may be a lot of difficulties going on in your life right now, but you're here this morning. You're right where you need to be. You are in the exact safest spiritual place that you can be if you're in Christ and faithful. And I hope that we've known that for a long time now, but sometimes we need to be reminded of it. Any questions or comments about that section of Mark or Mark 4 in general?
And what was said when they got to shore, and they said, what happened, man, you see that storm and it just went away? I mean, that would have brought a lot of talk with a lot of people, and it doesn't say how many people that said other ships. So a lot of people witnessed that besides just the people who
Imagine being them. They had no idea what happened, but the ones on the ship with Jesus knew what happened, and I think you're right. There are a substantial number of competent witnesses that could testify to what happened. And even those who may not have known exactly what happened, they could say, yeah, man, it was bad, and then all of a sudden, it just quit. And then they find out, hey, you want to know why it just quit? Our buddy right here just got up and said, peace be still. What was that? I mean, can you imagine that? Good point. Anything else? Mark chapter 5. We're going to entitle this chapter Miracles, and I think it would be plain as we go through the text as to why. From this earthly domain in chapter 4 to demons in chapter 1, diseases in Mark chapter 1, and in this chapter we'll now see death. Jesus has absolute authority over any and everything we could think of, material or spiritual, and He's already proven that at this point in the narrative. We believe the overall application of the chapter would be Christ. And the Old Testament clearly taught that the Messiah or Christ, John 1:46, would work miracles. And that's what we talked about in Isaiah 53:4. And when we see the fulfillment of that, especially and exclusively what happened in Matthew 8:16 and 17, it's proof. Okay? If Jesus has the ability to do miracles in people's lives, and he proved that, does that not also show that he has spiritual power to remit sin? Did we not see that same principle laid out in Mark chapter 2? He healed a man's body to prove that he had authority to forgive sins. So he has all authority in heaven and in earth. It's amazing. So what's the point of all this? It's designed to create faith in our hearts. What is faith? It is confidence, trust, and conviction. In what? In the fact that Jesus of Nazareth is the Christ, the Son of God. So if we were to just say, we're done with Mark, there really has been enough information for us to draw that conclusion, correct? But we won't quit just now. The way that we're going to outline the chapter is thus. In verses 1 to 20, we're going to see the demoniac. In verses 21 to 24, and then it skips ahead to 35 to 43, we're going to see the deceased. And then on the way to work a miracle, in between, we're going to see the disease, the woman with an issue of blood in Mark 5, 25 to 34. There's the outline. Now, we're not going to hop around. We'll just work our way through the text, but understand that there is an interruption in the deceased, and so Jesus works a miracle on his way to work a miracle after he had already worked a miracle. So the chapter is entitled, for our purpose of our study, Miracles. We're going to read the whole section, and I think hopefully we'll get the total picture of it. If someone would read Mark 5, verses 1 to 20. Out loud for us. Anyone, please.
Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine, that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea, and drowned in the sea. So those who had fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country, and they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw that one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion sitting and clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed, and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him to depart from the region. And when he got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had compassion on you." And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled.
Good. Thank you. So this is the account of the Gadarene demoniacs, actually. Parallels of this are in Matthew 8, verses 28 to 34, and Luke 8, verses 26 through 39. Now recall what's just happened. They were trying to cross from one side of the Sea of Galilee, probably the western side, to the eastern side, and it has happened. Verse 1 of chapter 5, and they came over the other side, unto rather, the other side of the sea. So they successfully crossed from the western side to the eastern side into the country of the Gadarenes. Gadarenes references those who lived in the town of Gadara, which was located in the province of Decapolis, and I think that we saw that in the text that was read for us, which was on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. If you go and look in Matthew's account, you'll see the phrase Gergesenes. So sometimes it's not a contradiction, but it's not necessarily trying to nail down an exact location as much as it is that area of Decapolis and at least those general locations. So no contradictions, they complement, but sometimes when you start looking at this, it may have crossed lines. They may have gone from more the city location to more of the county, we might say, location. Verse number 2, and when he was come out of the ship immediately. What does that mean? Forthwith, straightway, anon, all those words. When he was come out of the ship immediately, there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now here's an interesting aspect. The accounts of Mark and Luke focus in on the more aggressive individual, but Matthew records that there were actually two men in this same setting who were demon-possessed. Now recall the various terms associated with demons. What do we see here? Unclean spirit, okay? Unclean devils, unclean demons. The King James sometimes will just use the term devils, though that's not the most accurate way to describe it. It would be demons. But you have unclean spirits, foul spirits, evil spirits. So that helps us see that these were real and distinct from other maladies. These were not just mental conditions that the people of the time couldn't diagnose. The Bible says they were demon-possessed, then they were demon-possessed. Okay? Even though we've never seen anything like that, we have confidence, trust, and conviction in the Bible that that's what it says. And so that's what it is. So what do we see? Focusing in here on probably the more aggressive of the two that was possessed with a demon. What's it called here? An unclean spirit, but I think we'll see other terms used as we move through the text. Verses 3 and 4 give several inspired facts. Now, if someone were to say, Brock, explain all these things, I don't know that I can. Other than it's dealing with demon possession. But I have confidence that that's what the Bible says happened, then that's what happened. What do you mean? Who had his dwelling among the tombs? Why? I don't know. That's just a fact. And no man could bind him, no, not with chains. What do you mean? I don't know, other than that's what that says. And I believe that that's what it means. Because he had been often bound with fetters and chains. What does that mean? I believe like we'd say iron shackles to some extent. So they had tried to shackle this man down, but what happened? And the chains had been plucked asunder by him. How did he do it? I don't know, it just happened. Maybe that was one of the things associated with demon possession. I don't know. I've never been demon possessed, so I can't say what was exactly entailed with that, but I can say that I have confidence that that's what the Bible says, and I accept it. You know, even though I may not be able to explain all the why or the how, that's what it says, and either we'll accept it or we won't. So what would you advise? Let's just accept it and move forward, I would say. The chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. So I'm going to tell you my position. We need to speak the same thing and say that that's what the Bible teaches happened, and that's what happened. Now, me giving the explanation of whatever, I mean, I maybe could try to do something, but it'd just be a guess. I don't know. Other than at least on this occasion, this demon-possessed man possessed what we would have to say is remarkable strength. Would you agree with that? I don't know that I've ever tried to break an iron chain, but I'm pretty sure I couldn't. Could you? I mean, where would you start? I don't even know. Anyway, notice verse 5. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. It's easy to forget that there is a sane, rational human being in that body. But evidently, his willpower has been overtaken and subdued by demons. This is a pitiful sight. Now, if you'll recall from a couple of years ago, I was given an assignment to preach somewhere else, and I did, called A Nude Dude in a Rude Mood. Do you remember that? When you look at all the parallel accounts, that is accurate. He was running around, at least at times, he'd wear no clothes. Was he a dude? Yes. He was obviously a man in a rude mood. What would you describe this? I mean, so it was kind of accurate. Of course, you know that's way better than I did entitle anything, so you know that was assigned to me. But it was true, and it's accurate. So don't forget that there's a sane, rational human being whose willpower has been overtaken by demons. Now, I can't explain all that, but I can accept it. And by the way, I forgot, there are some papers at the back that don't necessarily deal with demons because we already dealt with that. They'll deal with resurrection. So there are some papers at the back if you'd like to get them and add them to everything that we've presented thus far. But you won't need it probably today, but it's back there. Notice verses 6 and 7. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. I find that interesting. One of the most interesting things is no matter whether we should or shouldn't have watched it, we've seen movies made about demon-possessed people. And when you study what the Bible has to say about demon-possessed people, it's night and day. It's not even close. And one of the key things that sticks out is when demons spoke to Jesus, they were always kind. They were always respectful. Right? They were always reverential to some extent. And then you see how regular people spoke to Jesus and about Jesus, and it's night and day. So one of the first things that you have to notice if you've ever seen some type of movie about demon possession is it's almost totally wrong. But we're influenced by movies and things like that more than we think, in some instances more than the Bible. But demons never use that foul, profane type language that's so common in various Hollywood movies. Now, notice something else. None of the accounts, neither Mark nor Matthew nor Luke, give any indication that this demon-possessed man was rebuked by Jesus for worshiping him. What does it mean he worshiped him? The literal meaning of those words means to fall at his feet, and that's exactly what he did. But not just to fall at someone's feet, but to fall at someone's feet in adoration, really, of them being deity. Did Jesus rebuke him or the demon or anybody for that? No, he did not. Now we see here, and especially if we were to go back into chapter 3 where we saw an example of blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, that this demon-possessed man spoke better of Jesus than some human beings did. Very plainly. Very plainly. Now think of, this is, about every time I talk about demons, I have to bring this up. The Bible affirms that demons believe, James 2:19. And here we see an example. What did this demon-possessed man say about Jesus? He confessed him to be Son of the Most High God. So demons believed and confessed that Jesus was the Son of the Most High God, and yet they knew that torment awaited. I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. You may want to note what's said in Matthew 8:29. And notice the parallel from Luke 8:31. Jesus was the one with the ability and the authority to send them into the deep, which probably is Bible language to put them in Tartarus, 2 Peter 2:4. Now what's the point? Do you know how many people teach a plan of salvation that's nothing more than what the demons did? Believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is the Son of God. That's what the demons did. And yet the demons still knew that torment awaited them. I don't think I need to say much more than that. I don't think I need to say much more than that. For anybody, and doesn't seem like it'd be anybody in this assembly right now, but trust me that there are a tremendous amount of people. What must I do to be saved? Believe in your heart, confess with the mouth. Then say, the Bible teaches that's what demons did. Are demons going to be saved? No. Then what makes you think you're going to be saved? If that's all you do. It hits me hard. I don't know about you, but we need to think about that. And I think we may want to present that to some people from time to time, just to get them to think. If I've only done what I can show from the Bible that a demon did, what makes me think I'm going to get any different eternity than what the demons are going to get? Hello? Hello? Do we see it? Notice verses 8 and 9. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. That's weird. It's just weird. You notice how the pronouns will shift? He, me, we. Just awkward, isn't it? This was odd. It's just weird to look at. Now, this may or may not be recorded in strict, exact chronological order, But even if it isn't, we get to the same result regardless. Because the final word that caused the demons to exit this man's body was go. And that's what Matthew 8:32 says. So Jesus may have, for whatever reason, carried on somewhat of a conversation with this demon, but when Jesus said go, they went. And there's no doubt about that. So it wasn't that Jesus struggled. It wasn't that there was any issue with anything going on here. Jesus, for whatever reason, seems to carry on somewhat of a conversation with the demons. Now notice what it says. What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. A Roman regiment was said to be 6,000. Now I'm not saying that this man had 6,000 demons in his body, but it seems that he had a great multitude. There was a plurality of demons that had overtaken this man's physical body, including his willpower, because he wasn't really in control of himself. Do you think a sane, rational man would cry and cut himself with stones and walk around with no clothes on and sleep and lay among the tombs? So there's a rational man in there, but he's overpowered by these demons. And it may be that the reason he was overpowered because there was way more of them rather than there were him. I don't know. That's a guess. I've never been demon-possessed. I can't say that. But I know when it goes from he to my to we, that's just strange. That's just strange. So maybe some of those demons were fighting for supremacy as who was actually going to have the right to speak. I don't know. Can't say. I can say it's strange. It's odd. But it's real because that's what the Bible teaches. Now notice again, verse number 10. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. So he seems to indicate maybe the most vocal of the demons. Besought him, begged Jesus much that he, Jesus, would not send them, this legion, the plurality of demons, away out of the country. Now, out of the country seems to be parallel with into the deep from Luke 8:31, and could indicate that when Jesus sent them out, they're going to Tartarus, which would be the bad side of the Hadean realm from Luke 16:19-31, and also that Greek word is used in 2 Peter 2:4, but it's translated as what? We had a sermon on this not too long ago. Hell. There are at least 3 distinct Greek words in the King James Version that are all translated as hell. Hades is generally translated as hell. Gehenna is generally translated as hell, sometimes hellfire. And then Tartarus is used at least once in 2 Peter 2:4, and it's translated as hell. So what's the difference? Hades is the realm of all the dead. Okay. Gehenna is the ultimate location after the resurrection and the judgment of all the wicked. But Tartarus seems to be the bad side of the Hadean world or the Hadean realm. But we've talked about that. Notice verses 11 and 12. So they're begging, let us stay right where we are. Okay. Now, verse 11 and 12. There was nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding. And all the devils, all the demons, besought him, begged him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. So it appears that demons preferred a living body. And if they had their first choice, it seems that their first choice was what? Humans. A living human body. As we go through the text of Mark, we're going to find out it was not limited to men, and it was not limited to adults. There were small children who were demon-possessed. So some people think, especially from the movies, that these people did something wrong in order to end up demon-possessed. There's no indication of that from the Bible. It just seems like it happened, and there was a randomness to it, or if there is some sort of a pattern to it, I don't know what it is. Because when you see men and then small children, that's pretty broad spectrum right there when you stop and think about it. So it appears that demons wanted a living human body, Matthew 12:43-45, but at least on this occasion they would settle for what? They would settle for a herd of swine. Now for those under the law of Moses, swine, I don't know that we always call it that, maybe we call it hogs, were unclean animals. That's Leviticus 11 and verse 7, which could indicate, notice I said could, it could indicate that the owner of the swine was not of the physical descent of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, or Jacob's 12 male sons. So it may be that this was a Gentile group of people. But then again, You know, some people, I'm sure then as well as today, does even every member of the church always totally obey what the New Testament teaches? No. So you may have had some Jews here that just said, I don't care what the Bible says, I'm going to make money off swine. I don't know. But it could indicate that these people were Gentiles. But even if they are or aren't, what changes? Nothing. Nothing. It changes nothing with regard to what Jesus did. Now notice verse 13, and forthwith, straightway, immediately. There's a sense of immediacy to this. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine. And the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000 and were choked in the sea. So pay attention to the language of the Bible. Went out, entered into. Do you see that? Went out, entered into. Now, how much is a hog worth today, let's say, or a swine, however you would like to look at that? Based on limited research and limited knowledge, it appears that the least, if you have a hog, let's say, that's at least $50. Most of them are probably worth a good bit more than that. But saying on the light end, it appears that the current value, if you have a hog, a swine, pig, whatever you want to say, that's $50. Well, what's $50 times 2,000? That's $100,000. I don't know about you, but $100,000 is a pretty significant investment, wouldn't you say? Yes, it is. So I believe that's a significant investment of any day, time, or culture. Now, what's happened here? Jesus gave them leave. Jesus gives the demons permission to exit out of this living human male's body and enter into the swine. Okay? How many swine did they enter into? It says they were about 2,000, and it appears that all 2,000 of them were choked in the sea. So was it a demon for a pig? I don't know. I have no idea. Why could they not control the swine? Could they? There's a lot of things I can't answer. But because I can't answer it, that doesn't mean it's untrue. You stop to think about that? Because why? I don't know anything directly about demon possession because I've never been demon possessed, and neither have you. So it's hard to say all the ins and outs, but hopefully we have conviction enough to state, there it is. Maybe it's harder to control a pig than you think. Have you ever been in a pig to try and control? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? We can't relate to that because my soul and spirit has only ever been attached to this body. I know how to control this body, that's it. But if you were to take my soul or spirit and put it in something else, what would I do? I have no idea. None. So maybe they couldn't control it. Maybe it was something else. I have no idea. But what do I know? Forthwith, Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000 and were choked in the sea. That's what I know. That's what I believe. Now, just because I can't explain everything, would you like to give it a shot? I mean, see, would you care to give it a shot? I mean, because there's going to be a lot of assumptions and a lot of suppositions, and maybe some of them are right, but it still won't change the fact that that's what happened. Well, let's stop right there. And Lord willing, we'll come back next time. Yes?
What happened to the demons? Do you assume that they died there?
I believe the answer is, look at verse 10. They were sent out of the country. Now, what does that mean? Look at the parallel in Luke chapter 8. And notice verse 31. And they besought him, Luke 8:31, that he would not command them to go out into the deep. Okay? So taking those and then going back to Mark 5 and verse 7, torment me not. So no, they did not poof out of existence. They went to be tormented. Does that answer your question? And that's straight from the text. So what happened to the pigs? They were like Rover. They're dead all over. They're just dead. But what happened to the demons? I think that if we understand what demons were, they went to torment. So they did not get annihilated out of existence. It appears that they went into the deep, which is probably Bible language for torment or Tartarus. How about that? That fair? That's fair. Yeah? That's what it seems, based off the fact that it appears that demons told the truth. So did they tell the truth about Jesus being the Son of the Most High God? We'd take that as yes. Did they tell the truth about, I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not? So it appears that they knew, yeah. So based off the fact that it appears that demons told the truth, they're tormented. Even right now as we speak. That's wild to think about, isn't it? Anything else? Good. Let's bow. Our kind, merciful